So I'm going to start again, Yutzi. 1944, April. The Germans are in Hungary. Just when Yonchi returned from Russia after 3 years in forced labour, and we thought the end of the war is near, the Jews have to wear the yellow Star of David. It is forbidden to listen to the radio. Jewish lawyers, doctors and actors must not work. Jews are not allowed to have help in the house. One took thousands of apartments away, and the homeless go into other people's homes. I only wish we would survive, together with our families. I would like to stay alive, that's all. So that's a very moving beginning, isn't it, to the diary? And it's fantastic. So you started writing the diary in 1932 at the age of 12, which is the same time that you started painting. That's when you did the portrait of your grandmother. And luckily the portrait of your grandmother survived, but the first 12 years of your diaries got lost in Bereksas as a result of the war, and that's why the diaries start in April 1944. Yonchi became a labourer in a suitcase factory. 4 months ago, I shed my old self. Now, this is 1944 August. 4 months ago, I shed my old self and live as Maria Copperduck. Middle of May, the Jews in the country were deported. Anyu, grandmother, Pishta, Shonyi, Anyu's husband. How do you pronounce that? Shonyi?
Shani.
Shonyi. Yonchi's mother, brother and his family, all of them. In the beginning, I saw them as I used to see them last, in the house where I grew up. My grandmother with her white head and wrinkled hands, sewing before the window, Onyu in her beige pullover reading a book. It's enough to see a pot of geraniums or a dog like Rex used to be. The last few days, we attempted desperate expeditions to save them. We sent a Gestapo car with a bribed officer to bring them up to the capital. He only travelled there to take their last pengos and abandoned them. Ferry, Yonchi's best friend in Munkac, left the ghetto and went into his office, carefully placed his yellow star on his desk and shot himself. In those nightmare days, we sat waiting if perhaps some of them escape. Later, witnesses arrived who saw them on the railway station being herded into cattle cars. Women were separated from men, young from old. Some were beaten, identification cards taken away, 80 in a wagon without food with a bucket of water locked in. Awful. Unbelievable.
And where was this?
This was in Budapest that you were writing, Yutzi. And so I think this is still August 1944, the next passage. No, this will be later, but I don't have a date. The first Russian to come into our cellar was civilized and placid. He was looking for Germans, soldiers and weapons. Somehow I felt that this is a historic moment, but I didn't perceive anything. The second group was wilder. They took all the watches and torches away. The third was drunk and wanton. Then 2 Jews arrived from the ghetto. They were terribly thin and almost unrecognisable. We gave them food and tried to hold them back from eating too fast. A little later, Yonchi arrived. I remember leaning against him to stave off fainting and clasping each other, for it was unreal, unbelievable to fill my eyes with the sight of him. Zuglo was taken 11 days before the Russians reached us on Madakhter. Zuglo? Is that the right pronunciation?
Yes.
Yeah. He came with them, Yonchi came with them for 11 days to be with us and take us back to Zuglo before the looting and raping starts. On the way, he said, a mine blew up 6 men a few steps before him. Now, April 1945. May 1945. When we came back from Munkac, JohnSeed declined the offer of the Brea brewery. He was offered a job. He can't start building a life for us, he said, while at home there is no organisation to care for the needs of the deportees who came back half-starved and without clothes. Not having a pengo to our name, we went to Vozari, who lent us 4 Napoleon gold pieces. JohnSeed used these to get to Bucharest, where the centre of the International Red Cross was, and I don't know what persuasive power he had, but he came back with a bond for 1 million Swiss francs. Then we went to Sas Ucha, where the Budapest Joint had their offices. The Swiss franc was changed into pengos and stuffed into 2 potato sacks, and off JohnSeed went in a taxi at night through the fields, crossing through the Russian border. As I heard later, he bribed the minister and founded 700 kitchens. Meanwhile, he lived from Vozari's Napoleon gold, as he wouldn't take a salary for this. What an incredible man he was. Yeah. May 1945. I went to the doctor today. I am pregnant. God willing, I want it. JohnSeed doesn't know yet. I'm longing to tell him. So that was me, you would see.
Mm.
November 1945. It was JohnSeed's first business trip to Vienna after the war. He went with the brewery truck. I was still worrying about nappies and towels and shirts for the baby, which were unobtainable in Budapest. Next evening, the doorbell rang, and there stood the driver of the truck with 2 large suitcases. "Your husband sent these from Vienna," he said. I couldn't imagine what it was. I opened the first one. I saw baby shirts, nappies, towels, and realised that these used to be mine. When Anu divorced Apu in 1929, I knew she left a lot of things in Vienna, but didn't think of it for all these years. As it came, and when it came, was to me simply a parcel that Anu sent, because I'm expecting, and she knew what I need. I cried all night, and I'm crying now, you'd see. So beautiful.
Yeah.
Do you remember?
Yeah.
Yeah. I cried all night. When JohnSeed returned, he said the Count Schönborn, who knew about these things, took them out from the storage, thinking it will be in a better place in the cellar of his palace in the Renngasse. I have to keep wiping my eyes. It's hard to read this, Yutzi. So moving. 9th of January 1946. Our son was born on New Year's Eve, or rather 3 p.m. 3 p.m. it was, but already getting dark. He weighs 3 kilos. His name is Janoschka, and he is the greatest wonder in the world. Well, it used to be then, you would see. Now he's just a 69-year-old man. Who would have thought? 2nd of March 1946. I don't tell this to anyone, but I feel I am one day going to paint better portraits than anyone. And you did, Yutzi. Because I don't intend to stop at that point where portraitists usually stop. I'm painting seriously, and I think I've improved. Now we'll skip to 9th of September 1947. On the 5th of September at 5 a.m, Peter arrived at last. So this is the second baby. Because it's a boy, of course, and now we have 2 sons, thank God. Well, because we've got 65 years of diaries to get through, Yutzi, I'm skipping quite a few years at this point. And we've arrived in Sydney on the 21st of October 1951. Our room is at a boarding house called Rozhnoi. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
How do you say it?
Rozhnoi.
Rozhnoi. This boarding house is like an island. It consists of Hungarians. Some are there for 5 months and just move into their own flat. Some were Nazis and some Jews from concentration camps. At this moment, however, everyone is equal, earning £14 a week. Galdi Tibor, who owned the fastest BMW in Budapest, is a house painter, and Halmi Jano, who owned land in Hungary, is doing hard labour in a wine cellar. The women do all sorts of strange jobs without language requirements, like stringing pearls, addressing envelopes, preparing sandwiches in shops, or learning to sew neckties. Kalina Ili, who sells cakes at David Jones, says, "Isn't it the same whether I wear my white coat in the cake shop or the chemist shop?" And Pali told us a sweet story about the place where he works as a cleaner. One of the Australian cleaners asked him what he used to be in the old country. "I didn't want to tell him," Polly said, "that I am a lawyer, so I told him I was a labourer." "Good boy," the cleaner said happily. "All the other refos say they used to be lawyers." And now we skip another few years and we go to the 12th of September 1955. I won the Woman's Weekly Prize with the portrait of Judy Barraclough. I know that the results of the competition come in Thursday's issue, and it was Wednesday. The telephone rang, trunk call from Viney's. "Congratulations, Judy." "Thank you," I said, thinking it's for the Perth Prize. "We just read it in the Woman's Weekly." So, now I'm going to change to a different volume. Next morning, Yonchi rushed out to get the papers. I'm in the clouds. The guard at the Art Gallery of New South Wales told me he and the other guards bet on me. The greengrocer on Queen Street was particularly proud of me, as he always stops to look at what I'm painting as he passes through the living room with a box of oranges and vegetables on his shoulder. And when I took the prize money to the bank, the teller grinned and said he had been expecting me. Oh, no, I'm all right, thank you. 28th of May, 1959. Finally on my way to Alice Springs. I feel like Ali Baba discovering the treasure cave, or like a child in front of an enormous box of chocolates. I feel so greedy. I want it all. I have begun 14 pictures in a week. On my first day, I painted Mount Gillen 4 times, and each time I see different totemic designs. At Bitter Springs Gorge, 100 miles away, I see hills which are like striped lollies, round green and pink ones. I painted a windmill with a kangaroo. I painted the dead trees which look like bodies after a battle. The velvet darkness of the night is soothing. My eyes burn from the vivid colours of the day. I have never experienced this. Colour has always been something which pops up here and there in spots and hues, something on which the painter's glance focuses. Here, it's a physical force, hitting you not only frontally, but sideways and from the back. Next day, we went to Ormiston Gorge, another miracle. I didn't even look at the majestic rock walls on both sides of this dry riverbed. Around me were surreal shapes in purple and pink and giant pebbles of the same hue. My eyes watered from the brilliance of the stripes and dots on those marble rocks, washed and polished smooth by a water that disappeared thousands of years ago. Let me add that the verticals and horizontals are so shifted that although I knew it was straight, it gave the optical illusion of being crooked and added to the unreality of the walk. Everything stretches around in abundance and magnitude and volume and quantity, massive, intense, noble, extravagant, like every part of the territory. (24th of March 1960). So I'm really jumping around, you'd see, to all different parts of your life. 24th. Oh, good. 24th of March 1960. I went to Buckingham Palace at 10 a.m. to get into the mood of the place. So that's quite a jump, isn't it, from Alice Springs to Buckingham Palace. I hope it's not making you dizzy. I went to Buckingham Palace at 10 a.m. to get into the mood of the place. I slipped on my painting shoes and waited. Princess Alexandra was late. Then we chose jewels. I couldn't care less, but it's not every day I see 50 big diamonds. She changed into the dress and I was nervous. However, no young woman of 22 could have been more cooperative. (13th of April 1960). I feel painted out. I sweat on the picture of the Pankey children. I finished John Sidley, and that is a good one. Underpainted blue abstract pattern. Started Jocelyn Stevens yesterday on orange, yellow, grey shapes while he speaks about gossip writers and scandalmongers. During the sitting, with the permission of the Orient Line, I told Jocelyn that I painted Princess Alexandra. He rang them, got reproduction rights for Queen magazine, and will feature a full page in the 27th of April issue. An evening at Wilfred Thomas's, an Australian who became famous at the BBC. Theatre and radio people, cultured, pleasant, diplomats from Geneva and the UNO and NATO, a few beatniks, and Josh White, the black singer with his guitar. He coaxed human sounds out of the instrument and sang well into the next day while we all sat on the floor around him, spellbound. What a treat, you'd see. A live performance by Josh White. 22nd of April 1960. I had to get to Lady Beattie's early as at 6:15 there was a program on TV about Stanley Donen and after that about me. As the only TV set she has is in the kitchen, we descended underground where there was a Siamese kitten and the Duchess of Westminster. After the program, we returned to the upper regions filled with orchids, pâté de foie gras, smoked salmon. Among the guests, there were Margot Fontaine and her husband, Dr. Arias, Moira Lister, the actress, and the richest man in the world, John Paul Getty. Moira Lister's French aristocrat husband told me the reason they didn't go to Australia was that they heard there is nobody to clean your shoes there. He wanted to take his butler but was advised against it. 28th of April 1960. Hairdresser in the morning, Renee and the staff opened champagne in my honour. Queen magazine appeared with my photo on the first page and a full page with Alexandra's portrait and the story. In Piccadilly and Oxford Circus, in front of the cinemas, there are huge photographs of me painting Alexandra's picture. On Bond Street before Agnew's, there are posters of it. So that was quite a splash you made back in those days, eh, Yutz?
Mm-hmm.
So now we're going to skip a bit again and we go to 3rd of August 1962. The Australian government commissioned me to paint Queen Sirikit of Thailand, but she doesn't want to be painted in Australia. 23rd of October 1962, Bangkok. When the Queen left, Tula came in and told me that not all the windows look out on the garden. Some open on the corridor, and the King was peeping. The King sent a message. Would I please not paint his wife's eyes so Chinese? Now, this being my first Eastern face, I couldn't tell the difference between Chinese, Malaysian or Thai eyes. I sent a message to the King. Please don't peep anymore. Then later, Sirikit sails in, steps on the dais, and we start. She is friendly. Do I think her face is wide as the moon? Could I please give her nose a little bridge? No, Your Majesty. And now you're back in Australia and looking at the painting. The Consul of Thailand comes. McCusker brings Russell Drysdale in his official capacity as a member of the Arts Advisory Board. All right, Drysdale says, I know you can paint a portrait, but the skirt, it's sculptural. The painting is a wonderful painting, and adds humbly, I couldn't have done it. Peter prepares for his intermediate exam. He stays up till midnight studying and then wants to be woken at 6 a.m. He is so gentle and thoughtful and loving and wise. It's as if someone much older and wiser inhabits the frame of a seedling tree that he is. Do you remember Peter then? You'd see, so 1962, Peter was 15. And now we will skip a few more years, and it's 1971, and it's the 13th of June 1971 in London. And so in 1971, I had gone to London and I'd left my job with IBM, and you were worried about me because I was sending you letters about smoking marijuana and dropping acid and all kinds of things. And so I think Yonchi and you decided you'd better go to London to see if I'm okay. 13th of June 1971. Last night Johnny invited me for dinner. I'm very glad and interested to get to know all his friends, which he mentions so often in his letters. We sit around on the floor on sacks of foam rubber. This was in my studio where I had these very rude cushions. We eat brown rice with vegetables and salad. Very tasty, you say. There is apple juice and vin rosé. I would state that they are, without exception, the gentlest, most intelligent people. Still, I wish Johnny wouldn't have met them. They have all opted out of society and reality. A marijuana cigarette begins its circling. Each takes a puff and hands it to the next one. When it comes to me, it's impossible to reject it. I take a puff. It tastes pleasant. They ask me how I like it and whether I got high. I said I did, not wanting to disappoint them, but I felt completely sober. Not like Yonchi. You didn't seem to be affected by marijuana, Yutzi, but Yonchi, of course, liked it a lot in his later years. So now we're moving on again. We come to the 20th of July 1972, and I'd come back to Australia then to have an exhibition and organise these family meetings. The family meetings John insisted upon are the most fascinating experience. He says families are the most uncommunicative units. We come home, say hi, go to the phone and read the newspaper. We swallow our dinner, say bye. We religiously keep Mondays free. We sit in a circle. So strong is the current, we are sucked in. Since their aggression is allowed to come out, there has never been so much love in the air. It's like a whodunit where the killer is someone nobody thought of. It was on one of those Mondays that the boys asked me to translate my journals from Hungarian. We are so lucky to have a mother who kept a journal all her life. We want to know about the time before we were born, about our childhood, immigration, the first years in the new country. Since then, the evenings always begin with about 8 typewritten pages of the journal translated that week. July 10th, 1973. John writes from Nimbin. He wants to buy land in a commune. Nepal was exotic, far away and temporary. Perhaps I'll get used to it in time. Peter says there are many middle-class parents whose children are hippies. Did you get used to it, Yutzi? I think you did. Over the decades. April 2nd, 1974. John and Greta take us to Tuntable, the commune, like the Garden of Eden in a way. 1,000 acres of lush green valley, a river and mountains and woods, and beautifully cultivated vegetable gardens. Some of the young people are nudists, and it's somehow natural here for a naked man to work with a pickaxe while an equally naked girl emerges from the river. Domes are being built everywhere, some coated with plastic, some with canvas or wood. The only existing old-type building is what they call the White House, the centre of the cooperative. There's a library, a tool room, a carpenter's workshop, a music room. In the evening there are meetings, lectures, the tribe, the big family. A fantastic spirit pervades the whole place, and I breathe easier. The experiment justifies John's being here. So I wish I had time to read more excerpts from the diary. You're slowly coming to understand the choices that I made in my life and to appreciate them and so on. It was very beautiful to read that transition, but moving right on, page 233. 14th July 1974, John writes that he has renounced all personal desire, has shaved his hair and beard and become a monk. Roughly my thoughts are, it's better than having a heroin addict or an alcoholic. But then how many middle-class Jews do we know whose sons have become Buddhist monks? I do what I have to do to protect myself. I take half a Valium and go to bed and pray. I led you a merry dance, didn't I, Yutzi? Mm. 9th of August 1976. On my first sitting with Joan Sutherland, she opened the letterbox, brought up the mail, and cheerfully announced, "The postman is here." She was a delight throughout. The world's best soprano sat humming a private concert for me. Sandy, the wardrobe mistress, arrives ahead of her to unpack the complicated edifice with the wig, tiara, jewelled belt, and arsenal of trinkets. 11th of September 1976, Nimbin. For reasons of his own, John still insists it's easier for us to come to Nimbin than it is for them to go to Sydney. I've grown used to the sounds of the night, mice scurrying across the floor, the creaking of the gate, and the mandalas moving in the gale. Branches of trees tapping on the iron roof. I'm glad to be sharing their life. There is a meeting in one of the houses to discuss the coming festival. Everyone brings food, home-baked bread, freshly picked vegetables, rice and sauces. We eat. I listen and sketch. I'm introduced as Judy, JohnSeed's mother. It's amazing how the babies and young children fit in. No whinging or crying. They seem to toddle from arm to arm, from love to love. 15 of us are meditating in the morning. Picnic lunches on the grass near the creek. As Tana Chan talked, the parallel between creation and meditation clicked into place. Tana Chan Yutzi was that old Thai monk that was living with us in those days. On my last afternoon, a brother found his way to the cow bales. He is a stranger, but not a stranger, easily distinguishable by the sitar he carried from India and by the oval bag containing his sleeping bag and earthly belongings, by the clothes he wears and the gentleness he radiates. He was greeted with interest that was concentrated and whole. He is on his way to Cairns to visit his mother. Would you like to spend the night? He is given a kerosene lamp and, because I'm occupying the living room, taken to the banana shed where there is a mattress. They come down for dinner. Greta spreads a checkered tablecloth on the floor on a straw mat. Then they go out into the moonlight garden to pick radishes, shallots, celery. A big chunk of cheese is added and tea. Roman, the boy, adds bananas, apples and dates to the dinner. Then he plays the sitar in the candlelight. Greta plays Haydn on the flute. I never heard her do this before and am amazed how accomplished a player she is. Sid, the taxi driver, picks me up early the next morning. We take Roman to the highway to hitch a ride towards Queensland. Sid calls the hippies the ones with the alternative lifestyle. He gets this from newspapers, obviously. Oh, it's good, the change they brought to Nimbin. Property values jumped. His only consideration. Spiritual values don't make sense to him. That was your taxi driver, Yutzi. Yeah. You're not falling asleep on me, I hope?
No.
Oh, good. I hope this is interesting for you because I certainly find it really interesting. Third of March 1978, Bodie Farm. So this was the community that we built, Yutzi. The house that my Janosch built stands in the beautiful valley. It has a large veranda which has been lovingly padded with chicken wire so Bodie can't fall over. A handsome staircase leads up to the bedroom, the only room which has walls and windows. Downstairs, only bamboo blinds keep out the storms. 3 people sleep there while their house is being built. I watched Janosch scything the long grass. I looked at the grandchild of Anu of Bereksas and Apu, the Budapest intellectual, swinging the blade in slow rhythm in the Australian bush and felt strange and dislocated. 15th of March 1978, an unexpected and rare joy. Peter raced in at the weekend. I'm late, and told me about some misfortune or other which happened at work. Just listen, I tell myself, just be. Bye, Mum, he said as he raced out. He then turned and came back. He said, I was thinking on the way out, what a lovely, wonderful mother you are, and what's the good of thinking it if I don't come back and tell you? Very true. February 1980. When I came back from the hairdresser, I found Janosch, Greta and Bodie had arrived. I dropped all my plastic shopping bags on the floor to delight in Bodie's embrace. And even in the small flat felt like my grandmother in Bereksas, spreading my hen's feathers above them to cover and to love. I went to Camp Cove with Janosch and Bodie. I swam and enjoyed watching Janosch swimming with Bodie on his back like a seal. Janosch even suspended his high nutritional principles and bought us all ice cream cones. He said, since we moved to Bodie Farm, I don't know the meaning of the word anxiety. What else can a mother wish for? Everything else is so unimportant. And then a bit more of a jump to 8th of September 1983, Alice Springs. The magic works again. On my 5th day here, I have 9 large canvases and 5 small ones for the book. Sand is deep, the flies are bad, Yonchi and I sleep in the Toyota. Mona sleeps under the stars. The desert is flowering in blues and pinks with masses of yellow mimosa and the constant presence of desert oaks. Yonchi says his feet had cramped during the night and that really 80 is too old to stomp around in deep sand in the dark of night. It felt like Arctic exploring, except it was hot. The sand was like deep snow and very tiresome to walk in. And walk we did, countless little trips carrying easel, chairs, boards, the roll of canvas, the esky with our food, the fly spray, useless, Kleenex, camera, film, cardigans for the extremely cold morning and night, and a life-saving and indispensable drum of drinking water. "27th of November 1983, my grandson's first letter. What a delight. He made me do what I never did. I used my imagination on a blank white paper. The waterfall cascades down, leaving a white presence, out of which only 2 hands are visible, beating a heart-shaped drum with other small red hearts floating. I'm including all of these pieces, Yutzi, because I've got photographs of these letters that you illustrated for Bodhi, which I'm going to use in the film that I'm making. So that's why I'm including that passage. "30th of January 1984. János, Greta and Bodhi stayed with us for 2 weeks. János used the living room as his office before leaving for the US. János had a haircut and trimmed his beard, for customs I presume. Bodhi has his ear pierced and wears a small earring. We make no remarks." But obviously you were thinking a few remarks about it, Yutzi, about your grandson wearing earrings. "2nd of July 1984. Saw a Four Corners promo on television. I yell, 'Look, it's János!' It was only a flash, but my disbelieving eyes caught a glimpse of his wrists in chains. Arrested? Handcuffs? Later, his letter explained. Hi, Yutzi and Yonchi. Beautiful winter days at Cape Tribulation, waiting for the bulldozers. We've dug about 10 holes, 6 foot deep in the road where the dozers have to pass. There are steel chains to go with them. When the bulldozers arrive, people jump down the holes, padlock their feet to the chain, and the hole is then filled in up to their necks. The police have to figure out how to get them out so the dozers can pass. That's the name of the game. Bodhi writes, I've dug part of one hole. "11th of August 1985. Next week I'll be 65 years old. I am very fortunate. I am an artist and still working to full capacity. I draw out the rituals of the morning, lovingly look after my flowering plants, polyanthus, primula and violets on the sill of the kitchen window, cyclamen in the living room. I spend more time preparing Yonshi's shirt and clothes and my personal toiletries. I also make a resolution. In my prayers, I ask God's forgiveness for grave mistakes I made when the children were small, because I cannot really forgive myself for leaving them for weeks when I worked in London. If God forgives me, it's up to me to forgive myself. So I threw the guilt off. I don't wish to be responsible now for the young woman who made the errors. God help me." 15th of August 1985, which is your birthday, Yutzi. What a birthday present. Peter sold the restaurant today and János bought a house in Lismore in his own name. How are we doing for time as far as you're concerned? Do you have you're okay? Because it's taking longer than I thought, but...
Not a problem.
Great. Okay, well...
I think to do this just to put the blind down.
Yeah. Yeah. 8th of March 1986, I did a one-sitting portrait of János. His face is superimposed on a glowing orangey earth colour, letting it come through. He wears his rainbow t-shirt with Earth First printed on it. János, who never takes any notice of my paintings, went quite mad with enthusiasm, photographing me, himself and Yonchi with the portrait. "14th of July 1986. The floor of János's house is covered with the carpet from Peter's restaurant. The house is a new community. Downstairs in the studio, t-shirts are being printed, Earth First. Volunteers silk screening, typing, addressing envelopes, computing. Barefoot helpers go in and out. I think some stay and sleep on the cushions. János sleeps in a caravan at the end of the garden. Next morning we drive to Bodhi Farm. The new community building there is a far cry from that first primitive structure where we ommed, beholding hands before lunch. This is an octagonal pavilion with a round skylight. The wood is polished to perfection. "10th of January 1987. Janosch phoned to say that Bodhi is on the train. He is coming to visit Janaka and Francesca, and would I meet him at the station? Bodhi arrives barefoot, punk haircut, with a guitar. Big hug. I love him. On the way to Francesca, Bodhi tells me that they, himself, Janaka and Brett, are busking. They are making money playing guitar and singing on the street. I find it hard to take. A few days later, Greta, Peter and I went to fetch him for dinner. His punk hair had been tinted pink. Yonchi calls him his pink punk, friendly, but insists he wears shoes. He borrows a pair of Janaka's. Bewildering. According to Greta, he is doing his own thing. At 10? He doesn't phone. Why? Greta says he is afraid to see us because he has now shaved the sides of his head. Do you remember this, Yutz?
Yeah.
On his last day, he phoned saying that he'd like to come over. He says, Yutz, one day when you have time, would you paint my portrait? He brought his guitar, sits on the floor bare-legged and strums and sings RainForest songs, and that's how I paint him. The angelic boy face under the punk dome.
I haven't read that book for months.
I know, Yutzi, it's fantastic, isn't it? It's so great that you wrote all of these things down so that we can remember them together at a time like this. Isn't it fantastic? 21st of September 1987, Ayers Rock. I first saw Ayers Rock 28 years ago. Now it is Uluru National Park. I remember the shed I used to stay in, the bunk on which I slept, and how at the end of our stay the plane took our sheets to Alice Springs to be washed. So lots of changes at Ayers Rock, you'd see, from when the only accommodation was in a shed. And I remember at that time you used to, in order to turn the shower on, you needed a pair of pliers. 6th of December 1987. I have prayed for decades for my children who seem to lose their way. It was only recently that I realised that Janosch has actually found his. Although different to what I expected, my wish was granted. And Peter, who for many long years has talked about being miscast in his role of businessman. A sensitive soul in a cutthroat game. The other night he mentioned in passing that a big corporation tried to headhunt him. I'm not for sale, he told them. I do what I like to do and I like where I am. Third of January 1988, Bodhi has been discovered playing at Paddington Market by some talent scout, and with Janaka they have been offered a job at Darling Harbour during the Sydney Festival. Bodhi is shorn at the sides again and his blonde top is an angry magenta. 22nd of November 1988. Peter's wedding to Shane was such a perfect, wonderful happening that the joy spills over for many days after. Leon Fink was the host at Bilson's, wonderful flower arrangements everywhere, champagne flowed together with the backdrop of the Opera House and the Harbour Bridge. Mia Havicus was the marriage celebrant. Storm clouds were gathering as the bride arrived. Anyway, Peter was waiting with Leighton, his best man. The orchestra played Vivaldi. Shane appeared on the arm of Jonathan, her brother who came from London, both blonde and tall and beautiful. She had a tea rose-coloured silk gown and flowers in her hair. I was very moved during the ceremony, but when Mia introduced Mr. and Mrs. Peter Kampfner, I cried. It was such a miracle. Janosch even had a dinner suit, but wore an Earth First t-shirt with a bow tie underneath. He has grown his beard again. It's quite grey now. Bodhi arrived without Greta, who had her dance group all week. 11th of May 1989, Budapest. János is here to spend 2 days with us. He's not interested in castles and museums. He wants to see the house where we lived when he was born. The Fürst Sándor Uca? How do you pronounce that?
Utsa.
And is Fürst Sándor correct?
Fürst.
Fürst?
Sándor Utsa.
Is narrower than it used to be. When we step in the hallway, an old lady asks us if we are looking for someone. I tell her we used to live here 44 years ago. She invites us in. We accept gratefully. There is an intimate and sudden recognition. Did we really sleep in that dark hall? All we ever looked at through the window of the living room were the windows of the opposite flat. János didn't remember anything except the smell. 19th of October 1990, Bodhi Farm. I am resting with János on the living room cushions while Peter and János argue about dole bludgers, taxes and the environment. Would I reach you easier if I wore shoes and a proper suit? A proud new loo is built in a rocky outcrop. Human waste will turn into compost in 2 years. Greta's lunch on the terrace gives Peter faith in vegetarian food. Marinated tofu in olive oil, soy sauce and garlic with a salad I watch her pick in the vegetable garden. Peter drives us back to the Gold Coast on dark curving roads in half the time I would take. János could have turned into a guru for other causes, Judaism, communism, anything. Perhaps I envy him. He is not regimented and works on what he loves, says Peter. It's the same with artists, I said. Society can't forgive dedication, obsession and love for one's profession. So that's what we had in common, I suppose, JohnSeed. 29th of March 1991, Bodhi Farm. At Bodhi Farm, Bodhi showed us his architectural drawings and spoke about how, at 14, he is playing basketball in the under-16s team. He waited modestly till we asked him to play the guitar. He now has a teacher and reads music. I was astounded as I remembered a kind of pop strumming from his busking days, and now I was hearing a young musician with a love for pure sound and an ambition to play scales smoothly. Greta brought her flute and they improvised together. I did 2 drawings of them playing. May 1991. It was Lou's idea to come and talk to Jonchi while I paint a portrait of him. The first sitting showed Jonchi in a sombre mood, though in animated conversation in which he always raises the centre of his forehead so his eyebrows run to the corners of his eyes and he half closes his eyes while doing this. Both Jonchi and Lou warned me after this sitting not to touch the face. Only the head, Judy. That big brain of Jonchi's needs a wider skull. Also, please emphasise his ears. It's the symbol of wisdom. The jacket is too smart. So on the second sitting, I painted the jacket over into a wine red pullover. And so I've put that in, JohnSeed, because I've got that portrait and I'm going to include a photograph of that portrait when I have this on the film. And then there's just 2 more from this volume. 19th of April 1991. I love the place more and more each day. We decided to stay here until the day of our flight. We sit at trestle tables on the terrace, soaking in the fabulous sights. One could paint Ormiston Gorge for a lifetime. This is near Alice Springs, JohnSeed. No overpainting now, just putting it down with gusto. Afternoon, we walked along the river until, to my delight, the Glen Helen group of rocks appeared and they were magical. I really enjoy impasto. This painting came out well and it cries for enlargement. April 22nd, 1993. Nora Hyson saw a photo of Margaret Woodward and myself. She liked the composition. We are both wearing white and the tablecloth is white. There flowed a tremendous current in my studio with the 3 of us, women, painters, interested in the portrait. Alas, I am the one who is standing, but for art I have to make that sacrifice. Nora is in her 80s. Her beauty comes through still. I used to think her unfriendly, but it's all shyness. The drawing she did of us is an artist's drawing. She was the first woman to win the Archibald in 1937. I was the second. So the only two women who won the Archibald at that time were sketching together along with Margaret Woodward. So you'd see, these were from the published diaries, which ended in 1995, and so I've brought along some volumes of the last two of the unpublished diaries after 1995 to read a few pages from those to bring us to completion. So 23rd of March 1994, Eva Morrison, the clairvoyant daughter of Rutkais, came to visit at last. Looking like any middle-class Jewish Hungarian, and what a wondrous gift she has. We sat in the studio. Jonsi joined us unexpectedly, of which I'm so glad, otherwise he wouldn't have believed what happened. Already in the car, Eva said the messages came in profusion. I see a large amount of money you have drawn in the bank to be transferred somewhere else. Blank. Silence. Who is Irenke? How do you pronounce that, Jutsi?
Irenke.
Irenke. The penny dropped. Yes, said Jonsi. I sent my niece in Israel $20,000, shows she doesn't have to wait for me to die first. We were stunned how she got this particular message. Who is Ochi? Asked Eva, because the name came in after Irenke. Ochi is her brother who was killed in Auschwitz. Is that the right pronunciation, Jutsi? Yeah. He is very grateful you have been so good to Irenke. As I look, more and more people are standing behind you. Your grandmother is there from when we started. Her hair is in a bun. She has high boots with lace. You say, she wore them always. She also has some seats, benches or chairs. I can't say because they are covered with white sheets. You say, she covered them every night with dust sheets. I get the name Imre. You say, my father was Imre. He seems to carry a small case. Jonsi said, he carried his stamps in it. Who is Jula? How do you pronounce that?
Jula.
Jula. Who is Jula? I couldn't think who Jula can be. Only later at night did I realise it is Jussi. Do you have a blue porcelain dish of some sort which somebody gave you who loved you very much? Blank. I can see it, said Eva. It has 2 ears on the sides, some gold. Ah, it's the dish Annie gave me, the Rosenthal. You have a friend, Vera. I have several Veras. She is fair, about your height. It could be Vera Kaldor. She is not very well. That night, Ibi took us to see The Phantom of the Opera and said, Vera cancelled our lecture this morning. She is not well. So isn't that incredible, Jutsi, that the clairvoyant saw all of those things?
Yeah.
She needs to take her coat.
Yeah, sure. No worries. Just go ahead. No, that's all right, Bunny. "12th of May 1994, Peter features in the Real Estate Journal in an article, The Secret of Their Success. In it, among other things, is written that he wrote the single highest commission ever carved at Hooker's corporate. And then there's a quote, he is currently the highest figure writer for Hooker Corporation in Australia and has systematically broken and reset all the sales records the company keeps. The article goes on with his track record and finishes with, quote, amongst a career of many highlights, PK is understandably proud of his involvement in pioneering the now skyrocketing trend in residential conversion in Sydney's CBD. Amongst many other properties, Peter has sold the Eastern Suburbs Mail Exchange, the Eastern Express Building, Esso House, and he is currently handling the sales of the Fairfax Building at Broadway. The recession proved to be no hindrance to PK's success." End of quote. Since then, he works, of course, for Knight Frank Hooker, has sold the Fairfax, and just yesterday 2 shopping centres. Our intimate conversations nowadays happen on his car phone. It's the only leisure time he seems to have as he sits in traffic. And then he says, I sold 44 million worth last month, he said. I raced the portable telephone to Yonchi's armchair so Peter can repeat this news to his father. So that was 1994, and now we go to the next year, 1995, 25th of March. Peter arrived at our hotel door yesterday at 3:30 p.m. He was on the waiting list and got a room at the same hotel on the 22nd floor. That's where we watched the sunset with a scotch in our hand. We attended the opening at the Schubert Gallery of Woman's Exhibition, where Margaret Olley has one wall, I have one wall, and there are another 52 women artists. 8th of June 1995, 11th of June 1995, Janosch, coming from Townsville, had a message to ring Brenda in Lismore. The local newspaper, Northern Star, got the list of tomorrow's Queen birthday honours, and JohnSeed is one. He knew, of course, as he had to consent, and he did. He said, quote, because it is important for Lismore hippies that a greenie receives recognition. So there he sits in Townsville, quietly doing aerobics and swimming every day, a visiting scholar at James Cook University. Ashana's supervisor, Professor of Psychology Joseph Reeser, aimed at having a faculty of philosophy at the university. He contacted a professor at an American university, inviting him to Townsville to organise such a sphere. When they introduced Janosch to him, the American said, "Good God, I know JohnSeed. I followed him from place to place on his lecture tour in the US." Contact established, they attended some dance that night. The professor, who was dressed conservatively and immaculately, Janosch told us, took his shoes off, and to my relish, I discovered that he wears a ring on his toe. Next day, the professor gave his introduction letter, and at the Great Hall of James Cook University was packed. Here's Professor Caldecott, and he started by stating that the philosophy of ecology is the Cinderella of the doctrine, and at present, he said, there are only 3 philosophers in the world whose expertise this is, he mentioned, and the third is here in this hall, JohnSeed. So that was kind of impressive, wasn't it? 25th of February 1996, Norman Glenn of Gallery 460 in Gosford asked me to a preview at his Sydney gallery. Juniper will be here, he said. Synchronicity. Next morning, Juniper sat for his portrait. I'm working non-stop now, changing his shirt under the jacket, mixing a deep black out of Windsor green and alizarin. Alizarin? Is that a colour?
Yeah,
How do you pronounce it?
I don't know.
Oh, no, okay. It left the carpet for dead. The seat of the chair looked like part of the Juniper painting backdrop. I painted the chair a Swiss pasture green. The carpet surrounding the image is olive, graduating into black. Filling out printed forms completely with male, female, choosing 2 for the Wind Prize, Hill of Caves and Luminous Light, both of Rainbow Valley. Another, Nightfall, for the Dobell Prize for Drawing. Leaving 2 beauties for Canberra's Modern Masters at the Solander to coincide with the Turner at the National Gallery. The tape of my interview of Survivors, founded by Steven Spielberg, executed in Sydney by the Jewish Museum, arrived for me to have, as well as the museum, stood neglected for weeks. I put it on the other night, and Yochi and I watched spellbound as I recalled our youth, our hometowns, families and the Holocaust. Yonchi said, human nature made our losses lose dimension. It's smooth, weightless. Jane Palfreyman rang after a long interval. The book sales are fantastic, she said. There are only 700 copies left. We bring out the paperback in September. That's of your published diaries, Yotzi. 17th of April 1996. It's a very rare pleasure nowadays to sit on a plane en route to anywhere. My solo exhibition opens in Melbourne tonight. Peter is sleeping in Ocean Avenue, an achievement in diplomacy via Yonchi. He gravely nodded acquiescence, saying it's, of course, for my pacification, not his. So this was 96. Yonchi was 95 years old and was very reluctant to allow you to leave Sydney. And so this was when you went to Melbourne for your one-man show. And then 26th of June 1997. The bedside table's drawer is crammed full with ointments, drops, tonics, antitoxins, bactericides, stimulants and sedatives. As I gave him one of his tablets tonight, he said, "You know, if by any chance I stay alive, we could open a second-hand pharmacy."
That's sweet.
Yeah, I know, it's Yonchi all over, isn't it? 27th of June 1997. Our grandson Bodhi coincided his arrival with his father's, who returned from the United States. Bodhi came with Cedar, another Bodhi Farm child, now 18. Cedar plays the guitar in the Red-Eyed Frogs band. Just as well they stay at Peter's, because last night they went to a nightclub at Circular Quay where the teacher of Bodhi's guitar teacher played. Yonchi would have probably called the police if he knew that they came home at 2 a.m. Cedar cut chunks of his ginger hair to stick on a moustache and beard in order to appear older, as he is under 18. So he cut his hair and stuck it on his face. And that's the last of the ones from volume 9, and now I just have a handful more from volume 10. January 1998. Janosch talking about the 2 weeks on the island. I think this was called Masthead Island, you'd see up on the Barrier Reef where we used to go with Bodhi Farm and the children. Ruth was lighting Hanukkah candles and slowly other friends joined lighting theirs. Apt, isn't it, just when a cardinal lit Hanukkah candles in the Vatican. Bodhi talking of lots of hammocks on trees with a cloth above their heads, not only for shade, but protecting them against thousands of birds shitting on them. Janosch and Ruth took books with them about DNA. Bodhi finished his first year at the Conservatorium of Music with a distinction. As he chopped onions and garlic for the tofu he prepared for our lunch, Janosch said, "This is what he deserves distinction for, not music." My Yonchi seemed to spend hours, waiting for me to arrive, concocting scenarios, all of them gloomy and scary. "My bad leg doesn't get the exercise now while I can't walk, but if McGrath wants to amputate it, I won't allow it. No way," he said. He repeated it compulsively again and again. Fortunately, McGrath said the leg is better than last year and there is nothing to worry about. Yonchi was a bit of a hypochondriac towards the end of his life, wasn't he? You'd see 1998, he was 97 years old by then. 3rd of June 1998. I hardly get to write the diary with my 2 lives. The opening of Portraits of Artists and Friends was a terrific happening. There were so many people that I did not know that Brenda Nile was there from Melbourne, as she didn't get close enough to greet me. Justice Kirby made a wonderful opening speech, starting to say how the relationship between art and law wasn't always a fortunate one. What with the Dobell trial, Bloomfield's losing the Archibald Prize because he used a photograph, and Mescanis suing Capon for saying yuck. Then he talked about another Artists and Friends opening 10 years ago, Canberra, by Nugget Coombs, who said, "I fell a little bit in love with her." That was what Nugget Coombs said about you after you'd painted his portrait. "It's the same with me," Justice Kirby said. "I've also fallen a little bit in love with her." Then, how many artists have had their hands kissed by Joan Sutherland? She had said, "Such a hand one should kiss." When he finished, I talked for 5 minutes about portraiture and its renaissance. Had my hand kissed by at least 30 people, all having been lifted by the mood of the evening to levitate above the everyday. Third of May 1999. So we started dinner. Peter made Yonchi have champagne to toast our anniversary. This is your wedding anniversary. We all pretended to enjoy oysters and fish cooked to perfection by Peter. "The pancakes are a bit dry," said Yonchi. Janosch rolled a marijuana joint and we all had a puff. For Yonchi, who doesn't know how to smoke, Yonchi drew in the blessed fruss, Yonchi opened his mouth and Janosch blew the white smoke in it. It was a bit like a bird feeding its young, and for me deeply moving. There was a change of mood and Janosch quickly set up the tape recorder for his umpteenth Yonchi tape. Yonchi was led to talk about his father. He had no idea if he inherited his mother's genes of longevity because she was gassed in Auschwitz, or his father's, who had tuberculosis, which couldn't be cured in 1910. But he was rolling now like a Mercedes-Benz, describing how he, every night, repeats the names of his aunts and cousins and the boys in his class, calling it gymnastics for the brain. Telling us how tedious and hard it is to sit in an armchair reading the newspaper from A to Z for 12 hours a day with a 15-minute walk with Vi in the mornings and a 15-minute walk with Yutzi in the afternoon. We listened with deep compassion. Then Peter unpacked a bottle which stood encased in a fine wooden box. It's Armagnac he was given for his 50th birthday, dated 1947, the year Peter was born. We sipped it reverently, and by then we laughed a lot. May 1999. By chance I heard about a place, Ghost Gully, an erosion near Tenterfield. As I'm always interested in erosions, regarding them the microcosmos of a larger area, I proposed it to Jan this morning. This is Jan Oliver Yutzi, who used to take you on painting expositions. So in 1999, you were already 79 years old, and she took you to Ghost Gully. The day was bleak and threatening, Arctic winds and a dull misty rain, but it's our last day in Girraween National Park, so let's brave the elements. Ghost Gully is a well-kept secret. No road sign indicates it. We had to stop at the Tourist Information Centre for directions. It took only 5 minutes on an ordinary street and only 5 minutes walk, and a wonder appeared right in the middle of the field, as if a giant would have split the earth with a knife, sinking the most elaborate Fata Morgana to the bottom. What's that, Yutzi, Fata Morgana?
You were in the middle of reading it when I had the same
thought. Yeah, okay. Well, I'll look it up later and I'll tell us both. As if a giant would have split the earth with a knife, sinking the most elaborate Fata Morgana to the bottom. No description could do it justice. Like 1,000-year-old trees, it has rings of a darker shade at various levels, a configuration so intricate that it took me hours to make a sketch. I sat on one of Jan's chairs, bundled up in 3 layers of warm clothes against the piercing gale and sharp needle pricks of icy rain, and didn't perceive any discomfort, so spellbound was I. It was Jan who alerted me to the cold, and reluctantly I packed dirty brushes, peeled the palette, pressed the painting down with newspaper as blotter, which threatened to flutter away. Home for lunch and siesta, but I could not sleep as the Ghost Gully haunted me. The sun came up, the sky cleared. I proposed to go right back there as the day's work was too interrupted and frustrated. Only the drive to Tenterfield is 30 minutes, but it was worth it. I painted a second version, and it seems it will have many consequences and brothers and sisters when I start to enlarge in the studio. And then the last piece, 2nd of February 2000. Every day I pray, Draga Yoi Ishtanem. What does that mean, Yutzi? Did I pronounce it right? How do you say it?
Say the last.
Yo Ishtanem.
Good.
And Draga Yo Ishtanem? Draga?
Dear
God.
Yeah.
Every day I pray, Draga Yo Ishtanem, because prayer is in Hungarian. As long as Yonchi is on this earth, please let him be well and serene, and let me make him happy. Give me strength to be a good and decent and patient to him always. Still, composure left me when Yonchi commanded me to ring the nurses' agency and cancel Helena's hour on Sunday morning. It's against my grain, I told him, to ring on Saturday late afternoon. Let's tell her tomorrow that we want to have Sundays off. This was still Stead in a reasonable choice mode, but he pumped himself into a rage, accusing me with plotting and scheming. Look at the bill, he shouted. They charge $75 for 1 hour on Sunday. I'd rather give it to charity. I cancelled Helena, then cried for an hour bitterly. The tears fell into the food at dinner. Perhaps the relentless slog needed this little outburst of grief. At the usual evening rituals, I was on my post, washing the dentures with his toothbrush, sliding them into a glass of hot water, undoing shirt buttons, preparing tampons into underpants, pouring mineral water in a glass for the night, and fill only half the minuscule cup in which he dissolves his Rohypnol. The caress came eventually. He kissed the palm of my hand, each finger wooing me back, nuzzling my neck. One night I heard him calling, "Yutz, Yutz." He was stretched out on his back on the floor where he had fallen on his way to the bathroom. His head was bleeding. He hit it on the corner of the video. Several thoughts flashed through my mind as I pushed a pillow under his head as I deliberated. Peter? No one person could lift him. I called the ambulance, which arrived in 5 minutes. I put all the lights on from entrance door all the way to the bedroom. Again, they were magnificent, gently raising him into bed, disinfecting and dressing the wound, taking his blood pressure, which was normal, advising both of us to take a Valium. It was 2:30 a.m. My other life starts after breakfast. I enlarge Sentinels, the Ghost Gully, Rushing Water Bald Creek, started a portrait of Colette Raymond, a beautiful woman who studied acting at NIDA at the same year as Jackie Cott, whose portrait she found in my album. And both of us married lawyers, she quipped. Jackie's became Governor of New South Wales. 28th of February 2000, János is here for 2 days and a half on his way for a 7-week lecture tour. His first stop, an urgent invitation to Hungary. An Australian gold mining company working in Romania had an overflow of cyanide into the river Tisza and later the Danube. In one's living room in Sydney television, one meets the sight of thousands of poisoned fish. As I saw the Tisza, memories of childhood gushed over me with the flow. The family drove in Yutsi's motor car to Badalo. We ran down the slope into white sand and pure silky water. Did I say the name of the river right, Yutsi? How do you pronounce it? Tisza? Tisza. Well, that was wonderful. Thank you so much. So we're going to take this film, Yutsi, and I'm going to use it as the connecting pieces when I make a film about your life. So thanks so much, Esther. And